Syntax is the branch of linguistics which is concerned with how the words of a language can be combined to make larger units, phrases, how phrases are combined to make simple sentences, and how simple sentences can be combined to make complex sentences. In this unit, we will learn the fundamentals of syntactic analysis. We will learn to represent syntactic structure using trees, and we will learn to generalize the ways in which words are combined in a language in the form of syntactic rules. We will also pay special attention to the phenomenon of ambiguity, so central in our linguistic communication. Some of the slides of this presentation will be pointing at slides that you have already seen, now put into context, and many will be self-contained, so I will only appear when necessary, as in illustrating some point, walking you through tree building, or doing some example exercises so that you have a guide on how to do the rest on your own. Enjoy the slides until then. The way the words in the sentence are grouped together also counts in determining whether a sentence is good or bad in that language. For example, English is a language that orders its sentences, stating first the subject, then the verb, then the object. So we say, the fish saw the shark, not the shark the fish saw, for example. Unless you are Yoda from Star Wars. Yoda speaks in an object-subject-verb order. So he says, pizza, I like, instead of the standard English, I like pizza. And of course, oftentimes, the things he says don't have the reception he might have been hoping for. For example, there is a joke in English that says, why was 5 afraid of 7? Because 7 ate 9. Now, when Yoda, with his unusual syntactic rules, tells this joke, he might, well, kind of kill it. See if you can identify the ambiguity in these sentences and represent it either with square brackets, like we did with the deer riding a bicycle, or with a very elementary tree, like the one we used with Sigourney Weaver and the alien. I give you the answer key in the following slides, but do try to do it on your own first. Every word is a member of a category that determines what kind of phrase it can form. We learned about morphological categories, and now it is time to learn about syntactic categories. To a great extent, these are the same, and that is why one oftentimes talks about morphosyntactic categories. But there are some differences. For example, in addition to our already familiar nouns, verbs, adjectives, prepositions, and adverbs, also called quantifiers in syntax, and here I give you an expanded guide for those, other important syntactic categories are determiners, words like the, a, every, their main characteristic being that they precede noun phrases, and conjunctions, words like and, either, or, but, which are words that join members of the same category. Many times, syntax does not differentiate between adjectives and adverbs, and so groups them together in one overarching category called A, or Q, for quantifier. And sometimes determiners are also part of that category. What matters is clarifying what your categories are and which members compose them, so that your rules are consistent with your trees. And talking about trees, let's start with ours. A phrase is a string of words, one or more, that functions as a unit in a sentence. The phrasal categories are built up from the syntactic categories, which are their heads. This means that a phrase of a certain type has a head of the same type. For example, a noun phrase, or NP, has a head noun in it, and possibly other things. Heads are obligatory. It is convenient to visualize the structure of a phrase by using a tree. So let me do so with our familiar categories, noun, adjective, verb, and preposition. Here you have an example of each. Now, each one of these words is the head of their own phrase, which is named after them. Remember, phrases are always named after the heads. So book is a noun, the head of a noun phrase. The adjective proud heads an adjective phrase. The verb read is the head of its verb phrase, and on, as a preposition, gives name to its own prepositional phrase. Now, heads are not the only elements within phrases. All phrases can contain other elements, other words that will also form their own phrases. Now, try to visualize the elements as I illustrate them. Let's start, for example, with the noun phrase, or NP, book is heading. It can also have a determiner phrase, such as the book, or this book, the or this being the determiner heading the DP. Likewise, the head can be followed by a prepositional phrase, as in the book on the table, or the book by Astrid Lindgren. Here, on and by are the heads of the PP, which includes also an NP. The adjective phrase headed by proud can include an adverb phrase, as in very proud, or a PP following it, such as very proud of my daughters. And the verb phrase in the screen can be beefed up with an adverb phrase, giving carefully read. And since read is a transitive verb, it can be followed by an NP, as in carefully read this chapter. A different verb might instead prefer a prepositional phrase, for example, arrive at the airport. Finally, our preposition on can also head a complex PP, such as right on the table. When a head is very often, or even always, co-appearing with a given phrase, such phrase is called a specifier or a complement. For example, the DP, the, in the book, is the specifier of the NP. And in read the chapter, the NP, the chapter, is the complement of the verb. Your book goes a little more in detail about these syntactic elements. Here I will only point out that specifiers and complements have a more obligatory character than other elements that can also appear in phrases, which are modifiers. In the case of the NPs, for example, those are adjectives, as in the beautiful book by Astrid Lindgren. In the following slide, you have these sample trees, but perhaps it is more useful if you try to do them yourself before you look at the answers. Again, The sample sentences are The Beautiful Book by Astrid Lindgren for the NP, Very Proud of My Daughters for the AP, Carefully Read This Chapter for the VP, and lastly, for the PP, Write on the Table. After that, you can try creating your own phrases and trees just by substituting the words but preserving the structure, so that Very Proud of My Daughters becomes Incredibly bored with these exercises, which of course I hope you're not. It is important to remember that not all elements in a phrase are equally optional. When it comes to verbs, there are two kinds. Transitive verbs always require an NP, noun phrase, within their VP, their verb phrase. For example, the verb devour can only appear in a sentence in which you say what you devoured. You can say, last night I devoured 2 pizzas, but not, last night I devoured. You can say, last night I ate or I fasted, but not, I devoured. The same with support. You can say, I support your proposal, but not, I support, without any NP following the verb. This NP, the pizza and the proposal, are the verb's object, and they are complements in their VP, as opposed to modifiers or adjuncts. That is how other elements within the VP are usually called, such as in 5 minutes, in I devoured 2 pizzas in 5 minutes. Intransitive verbs, on the other hand, require not to have an object. For example, run, fall, or arrive. You cannot say, I fell my brother, meaning perhaps I made my brother fall, or I arrived the plane. You can use a PP with these verbs, a prepositional phrase. For example, I fell on my face, or I arrived at the airport. Of course, things get a little more complicated when in very limited cases, these verbs can take an object, such as I walked my dog, or I ran my sneakers thin. But we're not going to enter into these complications in this course. What I suggest we do now is to get some practice with tree drawing. You will find some exercises in the following slides. Try your best first and watch the video for the answer key later. Okay, so here we're in the classroom again, and I have my board. I'm happy. Let's draw some trees. The first one that you have is Robin. Robin is a noun, and as such, it has its own noun phrase. And that's it for this tree. The next tree is the picture. So the first thing that I do is to write the morphosyntactic categories. The is a determiner. Picture is a noun. Now each one of them has its own phrase. Determiner phrase for the determiner, a noun phrase for the noun. Now I have to decide whether the determiner phrase is inside of the noun phrase or the noun phrase inside of the determiner phrase. You saw in the slide that determiner phrases are good specifier of noun phrases. So it is clear that this determiner phrase goes inside of the noun phrase. And be very careful here drawing the lines, because it is very important that you draw from the top of the one that's inside to the bottom of the one that contains. If you do like this, from the bottom, say, of the determiner phrase to the bottom of the noun phrase, it looks very cute because it looks like the determiner phrase and the noun phrase are holding hands. But you really do not want them to hold hands. You want to say that the determiner phrase is inside of the noun phrase. So be very careful to draw the branches accordingly. Also, please don't do something like this. It's again holding hands. And do not do something like this. From the top of the noun phrase to the bottom of the determiner phrase, because that means that the noun phrase is inside of the determiner phrase, and again, that's not what you want. So, be very careful to draw your branch from the top of the one that's inside to the bottom of the one that contains it. And that's it for this tree. Now the next one is a picture of Robin. I can kind of recycle this tree because a picture, a is also a determiner, so I have half of it done, a picture, and I only have to do that other bit of Robin. Remember, the first thing, morphosyntactic categories. Of is a preposition. Robin is a noun. Nouns get their noun phrases, and noun phrases are good complements to the prepositional phrases. So the noun phrase is inside of the prepositional phrase. And don't worry too much when you are drawing your trees about these curly branches. You know, as long as it goes from the top of the one that's inside to the bottom of the one that contains it, it's okay. You can then, you know, fix your style later on. Okay? Now, a picture of Robin is a kind of picture. It's not a kind of Robin. So then that means that of Robin will be inside picture, because semantically it is inside picture. So this PP will be inside of the NP. And here you have your other tree. Okay, the next one, a picture of the unicorn. Again, I can recycle most of the tree because I have a picture of, and the only thing that I have to change is this NP. It will not be of Robin, but it will be of the unicorn. So let me just erase it and see what I do with the unicorn. First, morphosyntactic categories. The is a determiner. Unicorn, a noun. As we saw before, a determiner phrase is a good specifier of a noun phrase, which is headed by the noun, and the noun phrase is a good complement of the prepositional phrase. So here you have the tree for a picture of the unicorn. Okay, now let's go for a very nice picture of the unicorn. This time I can recycle most of the tree. The only thing that I have to do is to add these extra words. So let me just make some space, getting rid of the VP. Not really getting rid of it, just moving it here. A very nice picture of the unicorn. Yeah? First, morphosyntactic categories. A is a determiner. Very is an adverb. And nice is an adjective. Now, my determiner is the same as it was before, so it's still the specifier of my noun phrase. So the determiner phrase, still specifier of the noun phrase. Now, what do we do with very nice? Very, obviously, is saying that the picture is not only nice, it's actually very nice. So very is modifying nice. So the adverb phrase is inside of the adjective phrase. And adjective phrases are very good modifiers of noun phrases. So I only need to connect it. And remember, from the top of one to the bottom of the other. And here you have it, a very nice picture of the unicorn, or at least it's three. Okay, now let's do the verb phrases. The first one that you have is run. That's the simplest of the verb phrases. You only have the head, heading, it's verb phrase. Now we have run quickly. Again, I can recycle my tree and I only have to do the extra word. Quickly. Quickly is an adverb, because it ends in li. Adverbs are good modifiers of VPs, so my adverb phrase is just the modifier of the VP. And there you have it. Let's go for run into the lake. Let's see how much of this I can recycle. Well, not much really. So, only the head. Run into the lake. First, morphosyntactic categories. Into is a preposition. The determiner. Lake is a noun. This determiner noun, I already know. The determiner is going to be the specifier of the noun phrase. So I can just go and quickly do it. How about the preposition? When the preposition goes followed by a noun phrase, then it's very common that the noun phrase is just the complement of the preposition. So it goes from the top of the noun phrase to the bottom of the prepositional phrase. And now, run into the lake is to run someplace. So then the prepositional phrase goes into the verb phrase. Here, I'm just not going to do another one of those curly branches. I can just adjust and, put my VP all the way up there. So here you have the tree for run into the lake. So the next one, liked the water. I already wrote it on the board. First, let's do the morphosyntactic categories. Liked, verb. The determiner. Water, noun. Again, the whole thing is a verb phrase. And the head is the verb. Now, the water, determiner, noun, we already know that. Determiner phrase will be the specifier of my noun phrase, and the water will be the complement of liked. There you have it. Liked the water. And now the last one. Really liked the fresh water with all his heart, which the doggy certainly did. I can recycle most of my tree here, or actually all of my tree, and I only need to add the words that are missing. So I have really like the fresh water with all his heart. First, morphosyntactic categories. Really is an adverb. Like the fresh is an adjective. Water with a preposition. All is that quantifier element that we're going to call here A. His is a determiner and heart is the noun. So sometimes with really long chunks, it helps to start from the very end, because then we can see, for example, here we can see the determiner and a noun. That's a nice noun phrase. So since it's easy to identify, we can just do it like this, and it's just a little bit less to worry about. Now this all, it might be difficult for you to understand now, but take my word for it, it's a nice specifier to the determiner phrase. And this is because determiner phrases are specifiers to noun phrases, and specifiers are the leftmost element in a phrase. So anything that comes before will have to go inside it. Preposition followed by a noun phrase, that's a familiar constituent, a prepositional phrase. Water is already connected. Fresh is my adjective phrase, and we know that adjective phrases are good modifiers, so we'll just connect them to the noun phrases, modifiers of noun phrases. And then really liked adverb phrases are nice modifiers of VPs, so I can just connect. And the only thing that I have to connect, oh, I forgot the P, is this PP. So with all his heart doesn't go with water, because the water has nothing to do with the heart, but it goes with liked. And this is very important, because both VPs and NPs would allow for this PP to attach to them. But you have to look at the meaning a little bit. So with all his heart is a kind of liking, not a kind of water. So then my prepositional phrase is inside of my verb phrase. So it might look like a big tree, but if you take it one little chunk at a time, and then you just add the whole, then you can actually draw a nice tree out of it. Syntactic trees, like this one, can be translated into syntactic rules, and vice versa. And this is what syntactic rules look like. Let me get any phrase. And for any phrase, I mean any phrase. So I'm going to give it just a variable x. But that means a noun phrase, a prepositional phrase, an adverb phrase, whatever phrase you want. And what I want to say in my rule is that xp contains or is made of, rewrites, we say sometimes, and everything that it contains. For sure, since it's an xp, it will contain a head x, because the head is obligatory. But it can also contain any number of other phrases. Here, since I don't know any categories, I'm going to give them also some variables. So my first one will be yp, and my second one will be zp. So let's write now some real rules. Let's start with my pp, because that's an easy one. What I want to say is like my pp contains, or is made of, and everything that it contains. Well, the first one that I encounter is its head, p. And the second one, its complement, np. So here I have my rule. Now, pay close attention, because the order in which you put these elements counts. This means that first, you have the preposition, and then second, you have the noun phrase. And this is important because if you do it the other way around, you might end up with something like all his heart with, which is not what you have here. You have with all his heart. Yeah? So keep in mind that the order matters. It is committing you to a certain ordering of words eventually. I have a syntactic rule, so let me just write it separately here. I have my prepositional phrase, is made of a preposition and a noun phrase. Okay, so now let's take another noun phrase, for example this one. Let's write everything that it contains, the fresh water. It contains first branch, a DP, second branch, an AP, and third branch, a noun. And be very careful to always that you have a phrase of a certain type to have also its head of the same type. Okay, so here we have the syntactic rule for noun phrases. Noun phrase rewrites or is made of a determiner phrase, an adjective phrase, and a noun. What else do we have? Well, we could go with this adverb phrase, and it's very simple. Adverb phrase only contains its head, an adverb. That's also a rule. I only have a phrase. I could have more elements, but here I only have evidence for an adverb phrase that contains an adverb. This noun phrase should be consistent with this noun phrase. Let's see if it is. So this noun phrase has a DP and a noun. This rule is contained into this rule, because here you have a noun phrase, a DP, and a noun. This one has additional a phrase. So the only thing that this rule is telling me, or this data is telling me, is that this adjective sometimes is there and sometimes it is not there. So I just put it within brackets. That's what brackets mean. What else do I need? Oh, I don't have any rule for my verb phrase, so let's do it. Verb phrase has an adverb phrase, first branch. Second branch is just the head, the verb. Third branch is the noun phrase. And fourth branch is the prepositional phrase. That's kind of a long rule, but it is a rule that is supported by my data. So I can write it with the other rules. VP is contained of, is made of adverb phrase, verb, noun phrase, and prepositional phrase. So here we have a set of rules, of syntactic rules, that produce this tree. And it can produce many other trees. You only have to substitute the words. When we have a set of rules that produce the trees and the language eventually, we have a grammar. And now you're ready to try the syntax exercises online. Try to make the trees and the rules that go with them. And don't forget to check the answer keys.